Here's how Brian Laundrie tricked police into thinking he did absolutely nothing wrong when he was pulled over by police in the police body camera footage. Let's break down some body language. That's next. And we're back, Schaikers. Yes, it's been a while, and I'll give you all a little bit of an update later on in this video. As many of you know, Brian Laundrie and his fiancé, Gabby Petito, went on a several-month van life trip across the northwestern United States, living out of Gabby's van. Brian arrived home to Florida in her van without the 22-year-old Gabby on September 1st, 2021. Brian immediately lawyered up, shut his mouth, and basically claimed that he had no idea where Gabby was. Brian then mysteriously went missing and now is still hiding. A few days after Brian went missing, sadly, Gabby's body was found in Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming, and the coroner ruled the cause of death a homicide. On their way to visiting Arches National Park in Utah, Gabby and Brian were pulled over by local police because of a reported domestic dispute that they had. However, police reported that Brian was the victim. But what did the police miss? So we're going to break down their body language and piece together the evidence to finally reveal what actually happened and how Brian tricked police into thinking that he was the victim. Now, let's get started.
Grand County Sheriff's Office.
Were you able to get a description of the intoxication?
Hi, can you hear me, sir? Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, I'm calling. I'm right on the corner of Main Street by Moonflower. We're driving by, and I'd like to report a domestic dispute. They just drove off. They're going down Main Street. They made a right onto Main Street from Moonflower.
Driver is showing some obscure driving, possibly intoxicated.
What were they doing?
We drove by, and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
Currently doing 45 miles an hour. Zone through here is 25. Oh! Subject just hit the curb. Correction, speed limit is 15. I'm about 3/4 of a mile into the Arches, just before the gate.
You slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
Okay, you said it's a white van?
Ford model with transit, black ladder on the passenger side.
White Ford Transit. All right, I will let somebody know. Thank you.
Sorry, officer.
You want to place your vehicle into park and go ahead and turn it off for me? No, park?
Oh, it isn't park yet.
Okay, turn off your engine. Go ahead and set your keys on the dash for me, all right? What's your guys' names?
Gabby.
Gabby, Brian? Okay. What's going on? How come you're crying?
This is the first image we get of the two, and if you notice what's going on is that the police officer asks, why is Gabby crying? Because the initial report, as you heard in the 911 call, is that Brian, the male, was slapping the female here. Actually, from the start, the police officer is feeling that the male is the perpetrator in all this and the female is the victim. However, let's keep watching and see how all this changes.
I'm sorry, we've just been fighting this morning. Some personal issues.
It was a long day. We were camping yesterday, and camping got stuff, flies and stuff.
Immediately, Brian tries to downplay whatever Gabby was saying because Gabby started talking about what happened that morning.
We've just been fighting this morning.
We're going to keep noticing that something happened that morning that was pretty terrible for Gabby. And Brian doesn't want to talk about it and just tries to downplay the whole thing throughout here. We'll keep noticing that. Because even here, Brian is talking about how there's flies, and that's why it's making her so upset. And there's just so many flies around in the summer in the Pacific Northwest. He's doing that to deflect and divert away from him and any fight he had with Gabby and onto flies. Now notice what Brian does here to deflect even further.
I'm sorry I hit the bump there.
Yes, Brian apologizes and uses the fact that his wheel hit the curb as a way to deflect and divert away from what Gabby was saying about Brian and their dispute to just talking about his poor driving skills. Something you may all notice here as we skim through the police body camera footage here is that Brian apologizes constantly to the police officers. Let's keep watching.
I was distracting him from driving. I'm sorry.
Now, Gabby gets on board with the distraction away from what happened that morning. Gabby is with Brian, and she doesn't want to see Brian go to jail. She doesn't want to see them split apart. They're not broken up, so naturally Gabby is going to defend Brian here. Also, something that we should be aware of that sometimes happens is that the female in a male-female physical dispute may take more of the blame than the male. And part of the reason is that she doesn't want him to get in trouble. Also, if she plans to still be with him, she doesn't want to send him to jail and him to come out of jail and then him to hurt her. So there's sometimes even that kind of fear that a female may have in a male-female physical dispute. We have to keep a lot of this background information in mind as we go through the footage here.
Can I get you to step out of the vehicle for me, man?
Yeah.
Just hang tight right there. Do you mind if I take your keys and just put them on your hood?
Interesting that Brian just completely complies with the officer without asking any questions like, oh, well, what's going on? Are we in trouble? Is there some problem? What's going on? He just automatically says, oh, well, here's my keys, indicating Brian surely knows that he did something wrong here.
I'm so
Thank
sorry.
you.
Brian here now apologizes randomly and proactively. Quite odd, right? What did he apologize for? Oh, I'm so sorry. What are you sorry for? The officer didn't even tell him anything that he did wrong. That's one of the reasons why when an officer pulls you over, he usually asks, do you know why I pulled you over? He wants to see if you're going to admit something.
I'm so
Thank
sorry.
you. Oh, no, you're fine.
Now, the officer reciprocated with Brian by saying, no, you're fine. See what happened there? Brian is trying to come across as very cool, calm, and collected, and nice and friendly and apologetic and appeasing to the officer. So naturally, the officer is like, oh, what a nice guy. That's Brian's plan here because the 911 caller said that he did something pretty terrible to Gabby.
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes.
Let's keep watching.
I'm going to go ahead and close your door, okay? Why don't you come over here? SO229, I have the female that was in the passenger seat separated from the male.
Now the officer has Brian and Gabby separated so that the officer can get Gabby's side of the story independent of Brian, where Gabby can just speak freely to the officer so that the officer can compare both sides of the story and see what the truth is. Anytime you're trying to get down to the truth, what you want to do is separate the parties. So you're able to hear all sides of the story independent of each other and see where the story matches and where there's a gap between the two stories of each person. If you have kids and you're trying to figure out who's at fault, make sure you separate them and get the story from them. Because what you don't want is one side of the story influenced by the other. And further, you don't want one side intimidated by the other, where they're afraid to say something because of possible retaliation against them.
You want to tell me what's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just some days I have really bad OCD, and I was just cleaning and straightening up the back of the van before, and I was apologizing to him.
So now we see Gabby in that body language cluster of pointing over to the van and saying, I was apologizing to him, indicating that she felt like she wasn't really doing anything too bad or wrong to Brian. And Brian was, I guess, in her mind, overreacting to the way Gabby was handling her situation of possibly being a little OCD, as she's describing here.
I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I just get really frustrated. Not like mean towards him. I just I guess my vibe is I am like in a bad mood.
What she seems to be describing is that she feels that she doesn't get mean so much as being nasty to somebody, to Brian, but more along the lines of just kind of cold and kind of grumpy. And it's likely because admittedly she has OCD. And when she says, I guess I was in a bad mood,
I am like in a bad mood.
she raises her shoulders and also twists her hand a little bit like this, indicating some uncertainty. So it's like, I don't even know what to call it. I guess I get into a bad mood. I don't know.
And I was just saying, I'm sorry if I'm in a bad mood. I've just been really stressed. I had so much work I was doing on my computer this morning.
As Gabby says, I got so much work on my computer this morning, indicates the emphasis of how much work she does have and how much, seemingly based on what she said before, how that makes her feel anxious. Gabby and Brian went on a van life several-month road trip, and her whole idea was that she quit her job and was going to be a social media influencer, both on YouTube and have her own website with a blog, talk about her journey and make videos and post on Instagram and all those types of things of what they're seeing and all the adventures that they're having together in their van. However, if you have OCD and anxiety like she does, and you're just starting everything on the road, it's not like she already had a website set. It's not like she already had a blog. It's not like she was already making a lot of videos and already kind of doing that kind of social media lifestyle. No, she was starting all of it on the road, which is extremely stressful. If you think about it, you're worried about your laptop power. You're worried about getting internet access. You're also thinking about how much footage you're recording and how much you have to post. She was, building a whole website on the road too, where she was going to post her blogs. As I said in my recent podcast, I don't even really get anxiety, but hearing what she had to do makes me kind of anxious. She had to do all this on the road.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I used to work at an organic juice bar, but I just quit my job.
Okay.
I was a nutritionist. That's
Oh,
what
okay.
that's my
That's
job.
cool.
And I just quit my job to travel across the country, and I'm trying to start a blog. I just have a blog and stuff. So I've been building my website. I've just been really stressed, and he doesn't really believe that I could do any of it. So that's kind of been like a...
Now, if you notice, right when Gabby said that she doesn't feel like Brian believes in her, she puts her hands on her thighs to support herself,
That's kind of been like a...
indicating that she feels exhausted from Brian's constant naysaying. This is how I think about it. If you know your significant other has OCD and can get anxious, why would you antagonize them and push their buttons further and talk about how they just can't do it and just be a naysayer about it all? Brian surely knows that that's antagonizing her, but he apparently constantly did it, indicated in her body language. So whether Gabby realized it or not, Brian appeared to be quite toxic for her. Now, following this body language cluster, notice what Gabby does here. See what you think.
I don't know, he's like...
Yes, at that moment, right after the previous body language cluster, she waves her hands low, indicating that she feels that Brian puts her down.
I don't know, he's like...
Brian seems to be very toxic for her.
I don't know, we've just been fighting all morning, and he wouldn't let me in the car before.
Now, as she continues to appear distraught, she looks over at the van at Brian, where he is, and then puts her hands on her hips, indicating her anger towards Brian for not letting her in the car. Apparently, this was something that she was really pissed off at.
Why wouldn't he let you in the car? Because of
Told me
your
I
OCD?
told me I needed to calm down.
Now, this is when Gabby starts hurting her believability with the officer.
Yeah, but I'm perfectly calm. I'm calm all the time.
Clearly, she's not, making the officer feel like, wait a second, you think you're always calm? You think this is calm then? Oh, wait a second, maybe there's something wrong with the way you're thinking about this and just can't think clearly. If she thinks she's always calm, clearly she's not always calm because she's not calm right here. Obviously, Gabby was referring to her emotion in general and not specifically in this instance, but nevertheless, this is what the officer sees and also hears, sees a disconnect between what Gabby said and the way Gabby's acting. And now he's going to be talking to Brian soon.
And he really stresses me out, and this is a rough morning.
A rough morning?
And this is a rough morning.
It's 4:47 p.m. It's not anywhere close to the morning. She's talking about the morning as if it's currently or right after the morning, maybe 12, 1 o'clock. It's almost 5 p.m. It's almost dinner time. Clearly what happened between Gabby and Brian was that it was such a big fight, such a big issue, so emotional, so much going on that she really has no bearing of time at this point. When you're very busy and you're very emotionally involved and you're thinking about so many things and so many things were going on that you just totally lose track of time. You have no idea what time it is because, looking at your watch is no real importance because you're dealing with so many other things at the moment that you're not thinking of looking at what time it is or, thinking about what to eat. Gabby and Brian had a big fight. It was not a small fight. It was big. What's interesting is that when Brian comes out of the truck and gives his side of the story, notice how Brian downplays everything that happened that morning. It's quite suspicious. Let's watch.
Why don't I sit you down in the back seat of my car? You're not in any trouble, okay? I'm not going to be putting handcuffs on you. You obviously don't have any weapons. I'm going to get you into the air conditioning, let you take a breath, relax a little bit, and then I'll come back and talk to you in a few minutes, okay?
Okay.
Alrighty. Like I said, you're not in any trouble. So just go ahead and take a seat.
Gabrielle, you talked to my fiancé, right?
What's that?
You talked to Gabrielle, right?
Yeah, I just spoke to her.
Yeah.
Now, Brian asked a very odd, stupid question. He says, oh, you spoke to Gabrielle, my fiance, right? Who else did he speak to? Obviously. But did you notice his body language? Take a look again.
Gabrielle, you talked to my fiancé, right?
What's that?
You talked to Gabrielle, right?
Yeah, I just spoke to her.
Yeah.
Yes, as Brian was mumbling and showing a lot of anxiety, he was also giving himself some hand-wringing, showing worry. He's worried about what Gabby possibly said to the officer, which also makes you think that Brian knows that he did something wrong. Remember, body language is all about situations, context, and clusters. If you're not looking at all three, you're not reading body language, You're just being an idiot.
You want to do me a favor? Let's go ahead and get you to step out of the vehicle, alrighty?
Now, if you notice, Brian complies completely as soon as the officer says, well, would you mind getting out of the vehicle? Oh, of course, I'll get out of the vehicle.
Get you to step out of the vehicle, alrighty?
Always remember, there's levels to this shit, okay? Someone could be perceived as a little guilty if they're so compliant because they may know that they are guilty and they did something wrong, and it makes sense that the police officer wants them to get out of the car. Or if they're on the other side of the spectrum of saying, no, I'm not getting out of the car. Oh, I don't want to get out. Are you going to arrest me? Oh, this is crazy. Oh, blah, blah. That side of things also could indicate guilt too, because it's being extremely combative because they know they did something wrong and they're afraid they're going to get locked up. Always remember, there's extremities here. If you're on one side of the extremity, you can be perceived as guilty. You're on the other side of the extremity, you can also be perceived as guilty. From the officer's perspective, Brian is coming across as extremely compliant. Sounds good. But someone who is that compliant may actually feel like they're guilty because they know that they did something wrong and agree that they need to follow all the officer's procedures because they did something wrong.
Come on over here. You're not in any trouble right now. So, tell me what's going on.
She just gets worked up sometimes, and I try and really distance myself from her, so like I lock the car and I walk away from her.
If you notice the difference in demeanor between Gabby and Brian, yeah, it's quite polar opposites. And naturally, the police officer is going to think, okay, Brian is more level-headed. He's more calm. He's more believable. The person who is more calm is typically going to be perceived as more level-headed and therefore more honest.
What happened this morning is that she's trying to start up like her own little website.
Now notice Brian's body language here. See what you think.
Blog and everything, so I give her time. We really had a nice morning.
According to Brian, they had a nice morning. Quite a different story from what Gabby was talking about.
This is a rough morning.
And even still calling that afternoon the morning because she totally practically lost track of time because it was that impactful of a morning for her.
This is a rough morning.
We really had a nice morning.
He's such a liar. I don't even know where to start. There's so much here. The first thing that we notice is that Brian stuttered. He clearly spoke in nervousness and anxiousness by trying to say it very, very quickly, trying to get the lie out very quickly. Sometimes when we lie, we want to say it really quickly to get over the lie and just say it really quickly.
I give her time. We really had a nice morning.
So that we feel less of the stress of lying.
We really had a nice morning with everything.
It appeared that he was struggling with his open body language, showing his palms. So what does he do? He brings them together to rub together in both self-comfort and self-defense, keeping a barrier between him and his body of when he just said the lie. He's lying so much here. Also, when he's saying, we really had a nice morning, he's giving a smirk.
We really had a nice morning.
Holding back a smile and some duping delight. Brian is clearly lying here and knows very well that they did not have a very nice morning at all. It makes us wonder, why is he lying? Oh, it was such a nice morning. It seems to be in defensiveness because whatever happened that morning that Brian did could incriminate Brian. Now notice again the very end of what he said right there. And we'll break it down.
We really had a nice morning, if anything, but
Yes, Brian starts saying, well, if anything, and then catches himself. Did you notice that part? Watch that again.
We really had a nice morning, if anything, but
Clearly, Brian was going to admit some kind of fault here, but then decided that he didn't want to go down that path. Like, wait a second, this could really incriminate me if I start talking about what happened that morning. Don't talk about what happened this morning. Let's just let it end there. I think it was fine. It was a fine morning. She says it was a wacky morning or whatever. I say it was different. Say? Interesting. But Gabby, on the other hand, wanted to talk about it, which seems to indicate that Gabby isn't hiding anything about this, is more open about this, and it seems to be more honest about what happened that day and that morning.
She wanted I locked the keys so I could walk away. I said, let's just take a breather and let's not go anywhere. Let's just calm down for a minute because she was getting worked up. And then she had her phone and was trying to get the keys from me, so I got in the way. I was just trying to, I know I shouldn't push her, but I was just trying to push her away to go, let's just take a minute, step back and breathe.
Brian claims that all he did was try to push Gabby away. I was just pushing her away. I wasn't doing anything. I was just, just don't hurt me. That's what he's claiming. Clearly, that's not at all what happened. If you hear the 911 call, and also if you hear what Gabby's going to be saying soon.
You want to tell me about hitting that curb?
Hitting the curb was her grabbing the wheel.
She grabbed the wheel?
Yeah. She said, I can't believe we're getting pulled over, and then she grabbed the wheel.
Did you notice how Brian sped up right there and then also tailed off in what he was saying?
She said, I can't believe we're getting pulled over, and then she grabbed the wheel.
Basically implying in that cluster, the way he described it, was not exactly what happened. There's so much more going on, and he just doesn't want to talk about it.
What about the speed? Did she take over the...
No, I
over the pedal on you?
If I was going fast, I'm sorry.
Now, the officer gets sarcastic with Brian, which gives Brian the opportunity to be even more apologetic. He's trying to continuously get on the good side of the officer.
No, it's probably just the moment of, I'm still shaking now. The adrenaline, seeing the lights flashing up, and then her gripping the wheel.
Now notice how many times Brian says sorry here.
So if I sped up, I'm sorry about that. Or if I was speeding beforehand, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it took quite a bit to catch up to you. So,
yeah. I'm sorry about that.
Now notice what Brian says here, oversharing information and also to become more relatable with the officer. Watch.
We're just going into the park again to get water because we have a 6-gallon water container to fill up, so we're just grabbing water for the hike.
When someone overshares information, we naturally feel that the person is more transparent and more honest with us. So therefore, coming across as, yes, more believable. Also, Brian talking about how he's thirsty.
So we're just grabbing water for the hike.
He's going in the camp to get water. Comes across as what? It comes across as very relatable. It's a very relatable story because everybody can relate to being thirsty and how bad that is. Like, I just want water. I just want to get home and drink some water. I'm so thirsty. Just talking about being thirsty may make you thirsty. It's very relatable. Here's the thing, guys. When someone comes across as relatable, they come across as likable because you're able to get them. You understand them. Understanding someone and understanding their perspective and actually being able to feel what they feel and live in their shoes is actually not too far away from being their friend.
Okay, and I was trying to keep everything calm and quiet because they're planning still to go for a hike, but it's good. I'm really sorry about that.
Another random proactive apology from Brian. If I were the cop, I would say to Brian, well, what are you sorry for? What is it you're sorry for, guy? You're saying you're sorry. What is it? And keep pressuring him to say something a little bit more specific because clearly he has guilty conscience. He knows that he did something wrong and did something he's not supposed to do. He's just generally apologizing to try to get out of trouble with the officer. Like, it's pretty desperate. It's just a desperate attempt of just like, I'm sorry. Guy, ask him. Specifically ask Brian, what are you sorry for?
I'm really sorry about that. Of course.
But the officer seems to be a nice guy and he just says, well, of course. Just, oh, okay, well, he seems nice enough. Oh, okay. Instead of saying, wait a second, you're apologizing for random things and just keep saying you're sorry. What are you sorry for, you ask specifically? What are you sorry for, Brian? What is it that you're sorry for?
Do me a favor. You want to go ahead and just take a seat right over here on the curb for me?
And if I was speeding, I'm sorry. I want to apologize.
Another apology, too. Now watch this part here and see what you think.
You don't have anything in that pocket or anything like that, do you? Nope. Just the wallet? All right. Oh, do you have your ID on you?
In the car, if you want to come with me.
You don't have anything in that pocket or anything like that, do you? Nope. Just the wallet? All right. Just the wallet? All right.
Brian Laundrie apparently and supposedly doesn't keep his ID in his wallet? Isn't that where everyone keeps their ID? Isn't that the whole point of a wallet? Is to keep your ID and your credit cards? What else is a wallet for if it's not to keep your ID in there? Why would Brian want to go back to the van to supposedly get his ID? I don't know. We don't know, and we may never know. What do you think? Maybe took out his driver's license when he got pulled over and he was going to give it to the police officer. Maybe it's something along those lines. But, I mean, just to take out your ID and not put it back?
No, we'll just do this. Just go ahead and take a seat. Brian Laundrie? I need a 29 name and date of birth.
And then what? And his reaction was to do what?
It's going to be out of Florida.
He just grabbed you?
Understand naturally, everything that she's going to tell the officers is going to be kind of downplayed. Telling the police officers what he really did to her is probably in her mind not a good idea because in her mind, she still has to share a van with this guy. See, this is the problem with van life. You know, you go across country and you're living out of a little van with somebody. You know, if everything's perfect, it's not so bad maybe. But as soon as you have a little bit of a hiccup, which you're surely going to have living in such close quarters with somebody, yeah, you know, it's not fun anymore. And it can actually become kind of dangerous too, because you feel like you're stuck with the person and maybe the person is someone that you should be leaving and you shouldn't be hanging around in a van with them.
Did he hit you though? I mean, it's okay if you're saying you hit him, but I understand if he hit you, but we want to know the truth if he actually hit you. Because, you know, where did he hit you?
The officer proactively and directly asked Gabby, where did he hit you in a deliberate skip? Instead of getting an affirmative answer on whether Brian did hit Gabby, the officer asked Gabby, where did he hit you?
No, don't worry. Be honest.
Gabby starts gesturing and showing the officers that Brian grabbed her face. And the 911 caller, if you recall, mentioned that Brian was slapping Gabby.
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes.
There's a little bit of a discrepancy now. The 911 caller said that he saw a slap, and Gabby's just talking about a grab of the face. Since Gabby's talking about her face and holding her face, very interesting that she's remembering back and being very descriptive. So clearly something like this happened where Brian grabbed her face. But also the fact that the 911 caller said that he saw the male slap the female, and she's talking about Brian grabbing her face, indicating that something like that did happen, in fact, because she's remembering back and she's showing the authenticity of it by reliving the events of holding her own face. And also the fact that she would likely downplay it a little bit. It seems that what actually happened is that Brian was trying to grab Gabby's face, which may have been interpreted as a slap, or maybe he did this and then he also slapped her, but she's not talking about the slap. It could be that too. But I think there was at least aggressive motion from Brian on Gabby to grab Gabby's face, indicating that Brian was in fact lying, that he wasn't just, oh, just stay away, push, no, don't hurt me, or anything so innocent that he was claiming, which also indicates that all of his compliance, all of his diverting tactics that we saw, all of his proactive apologies that we saw too, all of that was to cover up and to trick the cops into believing that he was completely innocent.
Slap your face or what?
She claims that he just grabbed her face with a hand. I think there was that grab, of course, but I think there was at least an aggressive hand motion with it too.
She's saying that they don't drink, but at the point when you lit them up,
They don't drink or anything.
She started hitting him.
Yeah, I was yelling at him, and then when you turned your lights on, I kind of punched his arm like there's just an idiot.
she's saying
It's interesting that Gabby reliving that event was that emotional right there. Given what we saw with Brian's body language earlier in this event,
She said, I can't believe we're getting pulled over, and then she did it.
seems to be more to this of why they hit the curb. If she was just punching him a little bit on the shoulder, the steering wheel would not magically turn all the way into a curb. Seems like something else happened, whether Brian did something back to Gabby and maybe there was some of that, like an actual physical fight. It seems that there's something else going on. Now notice what the police officer says here to Gabby and see what you think.
and we're not here to be mean to you or anything. Well, you know, there's a first time and then it usually
Yes, the police officer tries to explain to Gabby that there's a first time of someone hurting somebody physically, and then usually, as he gestures, it progresses and escalates from there throughout the relationship.
mean to you or anything. Well, you know, there's a first time and then it usually
Essentially, he tried to warn Gabby, but I think the reason why he stopped talking and didn't continue with saying that is because he didn't want to come across as negative and kind of a naysayer in their relationship.
just on the notice that you had some marks on your neck. Yeah.
And Brian has fingernail marks on him, further giving the police the idea that Brian is the victim and Gabby is the perpetrator in this.
And she's got some marks on her too. We're just trying to figure out what all happened.
Started at the beginning, well, I don't want to go too far back, but we've been in BLM land for the past week or so, traveling around, and the flies here are pretty intense, so the flies have definitely been getting to her.
And Brian continues to divert, distract, and marginalize everything that happened. Try and talk about all the flies and not anything that he did.
And then my feet are dirty and everything, so I think that our little squabble started because we were hanging out at the coffee shop, and when we got back to the van, there was some dirt and stuff in the van, and I moved our food around, so it was a little disorganized, so she gets a little...
Basically implying to the officers, look, I'm calm. Gabby's the drama queen. She's making it into something bigger than what it is. I just reorganized the back of it and had a little bit of dirt in there, and she just got all flustered. She's apparently OCD and things like that, and hey, you know, I'm the calm one. Believe me. I mean, she's over there, and who knows what she's telling you. Don't believe her. That's really what he's trying to get across to the police here. Also, if you notice when he was diverting, distracting, and marginalizing, he had a smile on his face the whole time, completely out of place, which seems to be duping delight.
We weren't physical before the point where I said, all right, let's just take a breather and walk away for a minute. I'll lock the van up and I'll go for a walk this way and you can go walk that way on the block. You know, there's that what is it called, moonflower?
Right, yeah.
You know, nice areas. You can go either way. It's all shaded. So let's go for a little walk and breather, come back. Because we're never happy with it.
He's trying to make light of the situation as well as increase his relatability with the officers by smiling and laughing. Hey, you know where I'm coming from. I mean, we're all guys here. I try to calm her down. She's just all upset, and we say we should split up, and hey, you know. He's trying to become across as more relatable with the police officers.
I was saying, let's just go for a walk, and she was trying to get the keys for me, so I was just going, just wait, back up, and that's when she hit me, and I didn't give, I don't want to push you, but I didn't give it, I I didn't get overtly physical.
And now Brian slips. I did not get overtly physical. But because he's so nice and calm and chill and laughing and smiling with the officers are going to subconsciously skip over that slip up and not be overtly critical with Brian here. Essentially, the officers should have picked apart what he was saying. Overtly physical? Well, how were you physical, Brian? How were you physical with her? And then he would say, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I was just a little physical. How were you physical, Brian? How were you physical with Gabby? And then he can try to get him to slip up further and make a determination that, hey, he's not saying everything here. He's hiding a bit here. And he's coming across as so happy-go-lucky and nice, try to get away with what he did.
I was just trying to keep her away and not get hit. And then I got really loud, and like that's probably drew everyone's attention where I was going, back up, get away, just give me a...
Now he's talking about getting everybody's attention of back up, get away. Getting everybody's attention. He apparently got people's attention. And the attention that he got was 911 callers that actually said that he was striking the female.
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
I think he was at least trying to grab at her face and kind of like make a mockery out of her. Like, look at you, you're crying or something like that. And kind of grab her face. And he was striking at her to grab her face to mock her. Because what he's saying here, that they were being very, very loud in public and getting a lot of attention.
He's swinging, and I was a lot of angles, a lot of nails, a lot of rings.
Yeah, you got 3 scratches in your neck. You got one on the left side of your nose. You got one in your face here, and you got 4 bleeding over it. So it looks like 2 hands coming in. Do you mind lifting up your right sleeve for me? I'm curious about something.
It's a little bit of nails. I suppose fingernails, but I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining about
Is it bruised or tender or anything like that?
No. Okay. I'm fine, and I love Gabby. I hope she doesn't have too many complaints about me.
Brian says, I hope she doesn't have too many complaints about me. Ha! Right after that, nervous laughter, indicating that he feels that she could be saying something that could get him in trouble. And he's not anywhere near innocent as he's trying to make police officers think he is.
We just had a front row view to the whole thing.
They saw Brian Laundrie having an argument with the staff in this Mexican restaurant in Jackson, Wyoming.
I said, this guy is creeping me out. I remember those were my exact words because his temper, you could feel it.
Try to make her calm down and be like, look, everyone's watching. And like, stop for a second.
You don't take any medications or anything like that? Are you normally this kind of like hyper?
Do I see my heart rate up whenever the lights flash on, it gets your heart rate up.
Of course, he's acting this hyper and this talkative because he's trying to get out of it and trying not to get in trouble with the police officers here.
What part of California is that?
I'm from a town just outside Grand Teton National Park.
More personal conversation with the officers, basically trying to get them to be his best friend.
He never saw the male strike the female.
Which that second account runs completely contrary to the other 911 caller.
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
The fact that you had 2 911 callers, that indicates there was something really bad going on.
He saw the male trying to lock her out of the vehicle.
He called 911, right? Because someone is in physical danger. That's why you call 911. You don't call it because someone got their feelings hurt of being locked out of a car. Clearly, there was something more going on here. And I don't think that other 911 caller called 911 because they saw a girl get locked out of a car and she was mad. You don't just call 911 because you have a couples fight. Usually a little couples fight, like, oh, they're on vacation. Look, they're yelling at each other and they locked each other out of the car. That's kind of funny. But clearly, this was way more than just that. Clearly.
Unless the guy's screaming that he needs to go to jail and did something to this girl, it sounds to me like she is the primary aggressor.
Sounds to me like she is the primary aggressor.
What was it you were attempting to accomplish by slapping?
I was trying to get him to stop telling me to calm down.
Well, it doesn't sound to me like she attempted to injure him.
And then there we get to hear a little bit of insight into Gabby and Brian's relationship, where it seems that Brian antagonizes Gabby. Telling someone publicly and loudly, hey, calm down, you're making a scene, oh, calm down, you're making a scene, like Brian was doing with Gabby, is not going to cause the other person to calm down. It's going to cause them to get more upset. Brian seemed to like to antagonize Gabby.
I got your hotel room tonight.
Thank you. It's right on that side.
And they give Brian, the likely murderer, a hotel room to stay in for the night. What's very interesting in all this is the timeline. This police body camera footage, and they were pulled over on August 12th. Gabby's last posts that have a actual geotag of where they were was on August 12th, the very day that they were pulled over. And her Instagram post was in Arches National Park on, again, August 12th. The same day they were pulled over. Makes you think, how did they get those pictures in Arches National Park? They're together in one picture August 12th, but they got pulled over going into Arches National Park to take pictures, apparently. But they were pulled over and they went their separate ways, and Brian went to hotel room for the night and Gabby slept in the van for the night. Interesting. What's a more likely scenario is that they visited Arches National Park the day before as well, and were just going back into Arches National Park to finish up their photo shoots and taking pictures. But she didn't really post much else after August 12th. After this body camera footage was taken, apparently everything went even further downhill with them. That seems to be fact, because she was not posting anything with geotag. She was not showing where she was. Clearly, what happened that morning was something major. They had a huge fight. Major. Something terrible happened with Gabby because she was found, sadly, in Grand Teton National Park. And they didn't show their trip to Grand Teton National Park, which is in Wyoming. Arches National Park is in Utah. It's a bit of a drive to Wyoming. Clearly, their relationship just went completely downhill after what we saw here on the body camera. Give this video a thumbs up if you think Brian Laundrie is guilty. Give this video a thumbs down if you think Brian Laundrie is not guilty at all. Now in the comments, why do you think Brian Laundrie did it? Let everyone know in the comments below. I'll probably make a moron video talking about what I think about that, as well as answer some of your questions. So if you're not subscribed to my more channel, you may want to do that so you don't miss out on new moron videos from videos on this channel. As you can see, we have a awesome big studio here. I basically spent a lot of time building the studio. But what we are doing is making more podcasts. We're really focusing our attention to a lot of podcasts, and we're able to really crank out a lot of podcasts really quickly. So if you want to see more content from me, what I think of issues, investigations, and topics like that, you can subscribe to my podcast channel. Link is in the description below. We also have a podcast video out on this case. So if you haven't seen that video or listen to the podcast on all the places you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google, Amazon, Spotify, you name it, that's where we are. The podcast is called Schaik, so you go check it out there. Subscribe for more body language and investigative videos. We're going to be talking a lot more about this case. See you at the top.